Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. Standing by in the wings, I'd like to welcome back Twig. Welcome back, Twig.
Hi, thanks again for having me.
Hey, we're glad to have you. Thanks for coming in. We have a pretty extensive hemp news segment tonight. We have video clips with Bill Drake, who back in the 60s wrote the Indoor Cannabis Cultivator's Guide, and other people. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Our first story tonight is out of Washington, back east in the District of Columbia. Members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee Subcommittee on Health on Wednesday held a legislative hearing, Cannabis Policies for a New Decade, during which they considered multiple legislative bills aimed at amending federal cannabis laws. This marks the first time that members of the Energy and Commerce Committee have debated issues specific to marijuana policy reform. However, during the 3-hour hearing, members declined to explicitly discuss the merits of any specific cannabis measure before the committee. They actually just called a whole bunch of police officers and prohibitionists to talk to them and tell them why they shouldn't do this. At a time when nearly 70% of all Americans want to end our failed federal policy of blanket cannabis criminalization, it's unfortunate to see so many participants at this hearing advocating largely for business as usual. The House Judicial Committee passed the MORE Act, which would completely deschedule cannabis. That was one of the things they were supposed to talk about, but they didn't. The fact of the matter is that legalization and regulation work. 11 states regulate the adult use of marijuana, and 33 states provide for medical cannabis access. The time for federal policy to reflect this political and cultural reality is now. Congress should promptly approve the MORE Act and put the failed legacy of marijuana criminalization behind us. We are very disappointed that the committee members failed to advance any of the bills before it, but we weren't surprised. Many of these proposals, like the MORE Act, seek to fundamentally change federal marijuana policies. However, the witnesses that the legislators called before their committee are proponents and purveyors of the status quo. A keyword search on PubMed, the repository for peer-reviewed science and research, identifies some 32,000 studies specific to cannabis and its constituents, more than any other single substance. While additional research is always welcome, it's not accurate to claim that we do not already have enough ample data to make evidence-based decisions with regard to marijuana policy. On another subject in D.C., federal prosecutions for marijuana-related crimes fell significantly from September 2018 to September 2019, according to a recently released report from the Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. The 2019 end-of-year report finds that the number of federal defendants charged with cannabis-associated crimes declined by 28% last year alone. By contrast, total filings for drug crimes increased 5% over the same period, totaling over 83,000 cases in 2019. Separate data reported that by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration in July reported a decline in DEA-led marijuana seizures, but showed an increase in DEA arrests for marijuana violations in 2018. State-level arrests for marijuana violations have increased year over year since 2016, according to annual data reported by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The full text of the 2019 year-end report on the federal judiciary is available online through the U.S. Justice Department. Former Vice President Joe Biden reaffirmed that he's opposed to legalizing marijuana without further studying its potential health risks. Even though there's 32,000 studies, more than any other substance, he says we need more. An interview Uncle Joe did with the New York Times editorial board that was published on Friday, today. The 2020 Democratic presidential candidate was asked to explain his, quote, more moderate approach, end quote, to cannabis policy when nearly all his primary opponents in the Democratic primary, as well as the public, have embraced broad legalization. Biden said, quote, because I think science matters, I mean, one of the reasons I'm running against the guy I'm running against is science matters, not fiction, end quote, whatever that means. He also said that he's not arguing that marijuana is a gateway drug, something he did indicate might be the case last year, though he walked it back after facing pushback and being attacked for the statement on one of the Democratic debate stages. He said, quote, what I'm arguing is there have been studies showing that it complicates other problems if you already have a problem with certain drugs, end quote, Biden said. The former vice president has previously said that states should be able to implement their own legalization laws without federal interference. Asked whether he'd support legalizing cannabis while simultaneously encouraging research into it, the candidate said no. Earlier in the interview, Biden was asked to reflect on anything that might have changed your mind about, and he brought up his record on criminal justice reform, particularly his role in crafting punitive anti-drug laws aimed at crack cocaine back in the 1990s as a U.S. Senator during the Reagan administration, actually during the 1980s. Well, he should regret that. A lot of people suffered and died, and families were torn apart by that. There are a lot better Democratic candidates in my book. Anyway, New Mexico's governor is formally calling on lawmakers to legalize marijuana this year. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, a Democrat, said in a 2020 agenda she sent to lawmakers on Wednesday that she wants the legislature of New Mexico to enact a bill legalizing the use of recreational cannabis in New Mexico and establishing a regulatory framework for its use, including public safety considerations, public health safeguards, and the protection of the state's existing medical cannabis program, end quote. One day after the governor of New Mexico formally included marijuana legalization in her 2020 legislative agenda, lawmakers filed a comprehensive reform bill that would accomplish that goal. The legislation would allow adults in New Mexico to possess and purchase cannabis from licensed retailers. It also includes a number of restorative justice and social equity provisions, such as automatically expunging prior marijuana possession convictions, promoting participation in the market by small and tribal-owned businesses, and providing for micro-business licenses. If the measure successfully moves through the New Mexico legislature and arrives on Governor Grisham's desk, New Mexico is all but certain to become the 12th state in the United States to legalize marijuana, as lawmakers are convening for a short 30-day session that starts next week on January 21st. While home growing would not be legally permitted under the bill, its provisions would decriminalize the activity by making cultivation of up to 3 plants and 6 seedlings punishable by a $50 fine without the threat of jail time, a simple infraction. Anything more than that would be considered a 4th-degree felony, however. There are other unique provisions of the legislation. For example, it would eliminate the gross receipts tax for medical cannabis sales, mandate that recreational dispensaries service registered patients, and create a subsidy program for low-income patients to access marijuana. A 9% excise tax would be imposed on recreational cannabis sales under this proposal in New Mexico. Up in the Northeast, the governor of Rhode Island called for marijuana legalization this week through a state-run program just yesterday, including the proposal in her fiscal year 2021 budget. Governor Gina Raimondo said that the adult-use cannabis shops should be operated by the government, which will source marijuana products through a contractor, while lawmakers in other states have floated the idea of a state-run program. Like many states have state-run liquor programs, none have been enacted thus far. The New Mexico budget states, quote, this legalization takes the form of a state control model similar to how liquor sales are regulated in New Hampshire and over a dozen states. This regulatory approach will allow the state to control distribution, prevent youth consumption, and protect public health, end quote. Revenue from cannabis sales there would be distributed between the state at 61%, the contractor 29%. Sounds like a cushy job. And municipalities, which would get 10%. The governor estimated that Rhode Island will take in $21.8 million in fiscal year 2020, $21.1 million in 2021, and $39.6 million in 2022, with the revenue expected to grow by 3% each subsequent year. A state control model for the adult use of marijuana distribution would enhance the state's ability to control the marketplace, deter overconsumption, and mitigate profit-driven practices, they say, end quote. Under the plan, adults would be able to purchase up to 1 ounce of cannabis per visit and possess up to 5 ounces at home. Home cultivation of recreational marijuana would be prohibited, according to a local news station. The Office of Cannabis Regulation, or OCR, would be responsible for regulating the New Mexico market, as well as the state's medical cannabis and industrial hemp programs. Next story is from Vermont. Vermont's governor is apparently open to legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana sales in the state, a significant shift from his earlier position. While the legislature legalized low-level possession and home cultivation in 2018, the current law doesn't allow for the sale. And Governor Phil Scott has said in the past that he's wary about allowing such commercial cannabis activity, citing concerns about impaired driving. But the 2020 New Jersey session could be different, as Scott is reportedly eyeing tax and regulate legislation and considers it a potential source of revenue to support an after-school program he's pushing. The governor still wants to ensure any reform legislation includes provisions to prevent driving under the influence. Our next story is about the new federal trade deal. After years of being one of the United States' main sources of hemp imports, China will now be required to buy a lot more of the non-intoxicating cannabis crop from U.S. Farmers under a new trade deal. Hemp, which was federally legalized under the 2018 Farm Bill, is one of a long list of agricultural products that China agreed to import on a larger scale over the next 2 years as part of the international trade agreement that was signed on Wednesday. China has been cultivating hemp since prehistoric times, but somehow they're going to start importing it from us too. From Bangkok, Thailand, licensed clinics and pharmacies have begun dispensing cannabis extracts to qualified patients under a newly enacted policy coordinated by the Thai Ministry of Health. The plants used to create the extracts are produced at 6 distinct locations throughout Thailand, productions overseen by the Thai Health Ministry. Despite Thailand's new medical marijuana laws, the possession and cultivation of marijuana for non-medical purposes remain strictly criminalized. Thailand is one of a number of nations, including Brazil and Peru, to recently establish a regulated system for dispensing medical cannabis products. Next story is out of Trenton, New Jersey. The New Jersey Superior Court has affirmed that an employee is eligible to have his medical marijuana costs reimbursed by his employer and that his health insurance. New Jersey justices rejected the contention that cannabis is ineligible for reimbursement under the state workers' compensation law because it's illegal federally, opining, quote, because we conclude the order does not require employers to possess, manufacture, or distribute marijuana, but only to reimburse petitioner for his purchase of medical marijuana. We discern no conflict between the Federal Controlled Substances Act and the New Jersey Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act, end quote. They further argued that the plaintiff's use of medical cannabis to treat his chronic pain arising from a work-related injury was both, quote, reasonable and necessary, end quote. The New Hampshire Supreme Court issued a similar ruling last year, as have lower courts in several other states, including Connecticut, Maine, Minnesota, and New Mexico. From Boston, Massachusetts, a majority of oncologists with opinions support the use of medical cannabis in elderly patients, according to data published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. A team of investigators from the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston and the University of Colorado in Denver surveyed a nationally representative sample of oncologists. Of those with an opinion on the subject, 65% of the respondents said that medical cannabis possessed, quote, some benefit, end quote, for elderly cancer patients, particularly as an anti-nausea agent and an antidepressant and or an appetite stimulant. Separate studies, such as those previously reported have shown that medical cannabis is safe and effective for a variety of elderly patients, such as those suffering from cancer and chronic pain. The full text of this study, Oncologists' Perspective on Medical Marijuana for the Elderly, appears in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. Our next story is from Ontario, Canada, but it's talking about the United States. 1 in 7 U.S. cannabis consumers acknowledge having purchased cannabis from an out-of-state market within the past year, according to data published in the journal Drug and Alcohol Dependence. A pair of investigators affiliated with the University of Waterloo in Canada assessed cannabis purchasing habits from 4,320 subjects who acknowledged having consumed cannabis over the past 12 months. Overall, 15% of the participants said they had obtained cannabis from another state. Respondents in states where adult-use cannabis sales were legal were less likely to make out-of-state purchases than were respondents in states where cannabis access is prohibited. Respondents residing in the South Central region of the United States, which includes Texas, and the North Central region of the United States, which includes Nebraska and the Dakotas, were most likely to acknowledge making out-of-state purchases. Those subjects residing in the Pacific region of the United States, California, Oregon, and Washington, were the least likely to admit having done so. The study, Out-of-State Cannabis Purchases in the United States, appears in Drug and Alcohol Dependence. This is our last story for Hemp News tonight. Out of Brazil, cannabidiol administration is associated with both decreased anxiety and tremor amplitude in patients with Parkinson's disease, according to data published in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. A team of Brazilian researchers assessed the efficacy of a 300 milligram dose of CBD in patients with Parkinson's in a randomized placebo-controlled model. Acute CBD administration was associated with a statistically significant reduction in experimentally induced anxiety and tremor. A previous trial similarly reported that CBD was anxiolytic at doses of 300 milligrams in healthy volunteers, but that it was not so at higher than 600 milligram doses and lower than 150 milligram doses. Observational data has previously reported that inhaled cannabis is associated with improvements in multiple Parkinson's disease symptoms, including tremor, rigidity, and bradykinesia. The full text of this study, Effects of Acute Cannabidiol Administration on Anxiety and Tremors Induced by a Simulated Public Speaking Test in Patients with Parkinson's Disease, appears in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. That is the end of our Hemp News segment tonight, and Twig, thanks for being there, is ready to play a song.
Thank you again for coming or letting me come again. It was awesome.
Hey.
This is an old blues song. This is about having to go and drag your old man out of the bar. It's an old Mississippi John Hurt song called Hop Joint. I went down to the hop joint's racing sand. Won't you look out, gangway, looking for my man. Won't you please bring him on home? Got me a brand new razor, got me a 44 gun. Gonna stick you if you stay here, shoot you if you run. Won't you please bring him back home? I went down to the hop joint's racing sand. Won't you look out, gangway, looking for my man. Please bring him on home. Please bring him back home. Thank you.
Thanks. We hope to have you back again sometime soon. So welcome to the show. It is the 17th of January 2020. And if you're watching us tonight, you can call us. We'll be taking your phone calls and questions. You can call us at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. It was interesting to hear that Joe Biden thinks we need to have more studies on medical marijuana. It's obvious he has not really studied the subject. He wants more people to go to jail for drug crimes. That's something I think that seems clear. I sure hope they don't nominate him to run against Trump, because I'd hate to have him too. Anyway, we are taking your calls again tonight. Give us a call at that number, 503-288-4442. We do have a studio audience here as well. If you'd like to come down on a Friday night, come on down. Just give us a call at our office at 503-235-4606, and we'll explain where to come to, when to come. For instance, the next 2 weeks, there's the number right there. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be in Texas for the Texas Hemp Convention, where I'm going to give a few different presentations, one on hemp biodiesel, one on the history of hemp, the evolution of the first 25,000 years of humans with hemp, one of my favorite presentations that I give. And also be on a panel talking about hemp fiber. So if you'd like more information about that, you can go to texashempconvention.com. That's texashempconvention.com. We have a video now from our friend Jorge Cervantes, the longtime cannabis cultivation expert and writer. I highly recommend his books and have for more than 30 years now. And this is a non-verbal video, I believe. It's a bunch of photos from his garden. But we'll be right back after this video. All right, that's our friend Jorge Cervantes. That's the camera, right? Yeah. That's our friend Jorge Cervantes doing a test of different lights on specific amnesia haze variety there. Pretty interesting, I think. Lots of pretty pictures. We have another video we're going to be running here in just a second that is with our friend Jack Herer. Jack passed away about 10 years ago. This video was made about 20 years ago. A lot of people think Jack Herer is just a strain of marijuana, but really, he wasn't really a grower. He wrote books about hemp and marijuana, but he had a strain named after him by the Dutch company Cincy Seeds and their owner Ben Dronkers. So they created the Jack Herer variety. It won a lot of different awards in the various Cannabis Cup competitions. And so here is Jack Herer back on hemp. We'll be right back.
The book's credibility got a boost from Jack's discovery of this 14-minute documentary. Supposedly made by the U.S. government 5 years after the Marijuana Tax Act. Its purpose was to encourage farmers to grow outlawed hemp during World War II.
Long ago, when these ancient Grecian temples were new, hemp was already old in the service of mankind. For thousands of years even then, this plant had been grown for cordage and coarse cloth in China and elsewhere in the East. But now, with Philippine and East Indian sources of hemp in the hands of the Japanese, and shipment of jute from India curtailed, American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy, as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand%. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp. For to grow hemp legally, you must have a federal registration and tax stamp. This is provided for in your contract. Ask your AAA committeeman or your county agent about it. Don't forget,
Jack often staged public showings of Hemp for Victory to validate his history of the plant. He also used the film as an example of government deception and hypocrisy. But he was stunned one day in 1988 to get a call from a newspaper reporter questioning the authenticity of the film.
Well, Mr. Herer, we went out to check the information, and we found nobody that would corroborate your story, that this movie was even ever made. You said this movie was made by the United States government, this movie Hemp for Victory, that if there would be any evidence that the government ever made such a film, it would be in the Library of Congress, it would be in the Department of Agriculture. It is in neither place.
His reputation on the line, Jack and his friends went on an excursion to Washington, D.C.
We were just determined to find the documentation that made it a credible government movie made by the U.S. government and not made by Jack. We didn't see it as detective work. We just saw it as we were on a mission. We're on a mission from God.
Many others before Jack had searched the Library of Congress for proof of the documentary's existence and found none. In a day of digging, Jack ran into the same lack of evidence.
After deciding to give up, we decided to give it one more try.
In a dusty old book, hidden among clutter in a back room, they found it. The official Library of Congress documentation. Indeed, the film had been made by the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Hemp for Victory.
So that is an excerpt from a documentary that's been shown on PBS about called The Emperor of Hemp, about Jack Herer and his life. He actually gave his last speech back in September of 2009 at our hemp stock event here in Portland, Oregon. He went backstage, and within 5 minutes he'd had a massive heart attack, and he never recovered from that and passed away 6 months later. But Jack actually wrote the first edition of that book of his, the Emperor of Hemp, or The Emperor Wears No Clothes. The movie was The Emperor of Hemp. The book was The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And he wrote that right here in Portland, in my house, back in 1985 on the first edition. So when he passed, there were 12 editions out of that book. He also worked with his partner, Ed Adair, and opened the Third Eye here in Portland back in the 80s, and his family recently sold that. If you know anyone around the country who wants to see this show, you can tell them to tune into that address there at the bottom, facebook.com/restorehemp. That's facebook.com/restorehemp. And if you're out there and you have a question for us tonight, it is the 17th of January, Friday, the year 2020. Give us a call at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. If you want to reach us directly outside of the show, then you can call our office at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. If you or a loved one have any of these conditions, we have physician referral services to doctors all across the country. Please give us a call for more information. Call us at 503-235-4606. That's our office number, 503-235-4606. I got some interesting news this past week that some of our long-term viewers, or maybe not so long-term, we've been doing this show for 23 years now, but if some of them remember, we for a while couldn't show our logo for the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation. The corporate takeover that happened to us actually was orchestrated by people who are now on the board of directors of the Kronos Group. And they brought in a $1.8 billion investment from Altria Group, the owners of Marlboro Tobacco. So our old clinic, which I had called Empower Healthcare, has just changed its name to Sun Valley Health. So don't go to Empower Healthcare or Sun Valley Health. We can recommend lots of other doctors. Give us a call at 503-235-4606. It's 503-235-4606. Actually, after the courts always ruled in their favor, and I spent $170,000 on attorneys to fight them, they spent $2 million and filed 30,000 pages of legal documents. And I demanded a jury trial, and they dismissed the case in April of last year. So our option to pursue them to get our assets back is to hire lawyers in the United States and Canada. And we're not in a position to do that right now. But for more information, or if you need a doctor referral for medical marijuana anywhere in the United States, call us at 503-235-4606. We have another video now we're going to run with Bill Drake. Bill Drake wrote a book that sold 7 million copies back in the 60s and 70s. It's the Marijuana Cultivator's Handbook, a classic from the 60s and 70s. Here's Bill Drake right here on this set back in 2007, a dozen years ago. We'll be right back.
In 70, when the DEA didn't exist, it was still a dream in the minds of the conservative right. When I first wrote this book here in Oregon, took it around to printers. First printer I took it to was a guy in Eugene. Real nice guy. Showed him the book. It really shocked him. But he agreed, you know, I'll go ahead and print it. Well, it turned out a guy in his shop was a John Bircher, who called the FBI here in Portland. And the FBI came down and visited the printer. And the printer called me up and said, I can't print your book. So I said, okay, that's cool, I understand. I came up to Salem, found a printer. Same routine. The FBI by that time was kind of following me around. So I went to 4 or 5 printers around the state. Same thing happened. And I sat there thinking, damn, how am I going to get this book printed? And there was a guy named Dave Holman who published the newspaper in Florence, Oregon. who was known throughout the state as probably one of the most conservative newspapermen in the state. I figured, conservative, right-wing, freedom of the press, let's go try this guy out.
Sure, First Amendment.
So me, long hair, you know, the whole routine, walked in. I said, do you believe in the First Amendment? He said, you bet I do. I said, print this for me? He said, you got the money? He said, I'll print it. He said, but wait. And he picked up the phone and he dialed a number and he got on the phone. I forget the name of the guy, but he said, so-and-so, this is Dave down in Florence. He said, I'm going to print Bill Drake's book, and you better keep your agents out of my shop. And he hung up and he said, that was my buddy, the agent in charge in Portland. It was great. And so it was the hippie and the redneck went into partnership to produce this book.
Always gotten along.
Yeah, they're under the skin. You know. But I have a lot of respect for Dave Holman. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but that man stood up for what he believed in. He stood up for the freedom of people to say what they believe in and would not get in the way of it. Whereas everybody else had just caved to the FBI.
Sure.
Well, I know in my case, if you go to the federal DEA's official website, I'm the largest single bust in the history of the DEA. I'm the largest medical...
I'm proud of you.
In the number of plants, right?
Yeah, I'm the largest.
How many plants have you
It's almost 50,000 in the two busts together.
That ain't hay.
No.
And they punish that like every plant is considered the same as importing a kilo.
Once I had
of
over
marijuana.
1,000 plants, I was looking at a life sentence. That's why we planted the whole field. I mean, if I'm going for one, I might as well go for four.
Right.
But what I was saying was that I noticed your cough balsams and different medications here. And
we have quite the antique bottle collection.
Well,
Our
still
foundation
have the
has
actual
about
stuff in them?
180 pieces.
Well,
These are three. In fact, two of these are new to our collection. Just this week they've been obtained. This one is the best example I've ever seen of the Lloyd Brothers cannabis. It says American hemp on there. And it comes not just with the bottle, but the insert, the cork that's supposed to go in it after you open it, and the little thing that held
These
it
are
on
all
there.
alcohol tinctures, right?
Yeah, this is 74% alcohol.
You want to talk?
Yeah.
Shall we talk a little bit for our audience
Well,
about
let
making
me-
a tincture?
let me give you this little bit of information real quick first while I'm still thinking about it.
Good luck.
Okay. In the Bible, there is a recipe for the holy anointing oil.
Sure.
Okay.
We've discussed that on this show many
And
times.
if you go back to the ancient Hebrew text, it's undeniable that they're talking about cannabis.
According to Roger
And-
Christie, I was anointed.
Yes, and I personally have made the holy anointing oil for many years. I can bear witness to the miracles that have been done with this. But
Praise the Lord.
everybody has, yes, God, praise Creator. But
Amen.
the point is that there's been naysayers for many, many millennium about everything that we've said. My dear friend Jack Herrera is very right and correct when he says hemp will and can and will save the world. Last week I got an email. A Jewish scientist in Tel Aviv took the holy anointing oil directly from the Bible, recreated it in his laboratory, and turned around and sold it to a multinational pharmaceutical corporation, and every airport in the world and every hospital in the world will be using cannabis products in the next 2 years.
That is Eddie Lepp. Eddie spent almost 10 years in federal prison. Then the white-haired guy with the mustache next to him was Bill Drake, the author of that Cannabis Cultivators Handbook that sold 7 million copies in the 60s and 70s. And then over beside him, he didn't say anything, but that's Ngaio Belam, very famous comedian. And that was just before our 2007 Hempstock Festival. So that was that show. So you can, if you have a question, give us a call at that number. We've only got about 8 or 9 minutes left here, so give us a call if you like at 503-288-4442. We have another film clip we're going to run. This is with our friend and hero, Dr. Philip Levesque, from back in 2012. Dr. Levesque passed away about 5 years ago, but let's go back and see Dr. Levesque. We'll be right back.
Died, and so
It happened very quick.
Every marijuana user in the United States owes a debt to Todd McArea, which can never be repaid in any manner, shape, or form. He
really
was the number one guy.
Humble,
It's true.
nice,
Yep.
conscientious,
Yep.
courteous,
And
friendly.
incredibly intelligent.
Very.
And he called the whole pharmaceutical industry the monomolecular mercantile madness. It's what he called it. And he knew that cannabis could take care of many of those things. If you have a question or comment for us tonight, we got about 15 minutes to go. You can call us at 503-288-4448. That's 503-288.
I have a question for
44,
Dr. Lebec.
Yes.
Go ahead.
During World War II, did any of the troops smoke this remarkable herb like they did? Vietnam, it was pretty much out in the field, wink, wink. Whereas it in World War II, did you all know about it, this wacky weed?
No, not really. But the whole thing it is that we had morphine, styrets, all the medics stuff, and the dog faces discovered the morphine, styrets, and so that's what they were using. So at the end of the war, we had a whole bunch of morphine addicts and so forth. But I don't think, from the guys from Texas and the South and so forth, they probably had their marijuana, but most of us.
Now, you got your PhD from the University of Oregon Medical School, which
Yes.
is now known as Oregon Health Sciences University.
That's right, yes.
And while you were there, I know you told me the story about finding huge gallon jars of cannabis in the cupboard.
Yes. When I started as a grad student at the medical school, Dr. David, the chairman of pharmacology, says, Lebec, I'd like you to go in and straighten out the stock room, whatever, just straighten it out. And the first thing I found was a gallon jug of cannabis cough medicine. And at that time, it was illegal for cannabis of any sort to be anywhere. And this was 13 years after 1937 or so, something like that.
Yeah. About 1950.
And it was manufactured by Park Davis.
Uh-huh.
And so I said, well, if Park Davis paid me to go to medical school. So I just said, if Park Davis says this stuff is good for cough medicine, it must be good. So I poured myself a pint of it like this. And it's probably out in my barn someplace, and it's probably still good.
All right. All right. That's a great story. This is an Eli Lilly container. We're going to do our little... Okay, that is Dr. Philip Lebec, a doctor of osteopathy. He was, along with Dr. Todd McArea. McArea was the first medical marijuana doctor in California. He'd been working on marijuana law reform since the 60s. Dr. Lebec was the first medical marijuana doctor here in Oregon. And in fact, we first started seeing patients right here in this studio before our TV show back in 1999, 21 years ago now. But we have one last little video we're going to run. This is John Lucy at the 2016 Global Marijuana March. We'll be back right after this.
You can hear me. I want to hear you say 420 back to me so I know you're actually listening, because this is important, because this will keep you out of prison. Can I hear a 420? Thank you. So, I am John C. Lucy IV. I own Law 420. I've done that for a long, long time. In fact, I've been a marijuana activist before I could even join NORML. I joined NORML and told them that I was 18 when I was 16 because my friends were going to prison. My friends were being put in cages. They were being put in cells. And some of my friends died in those cells, okay? Everybody here knows somebody who's been arrested for marijuana. Everybody here knows somebody who went to jail for marijuana. Everybody here knows somebody, if you know me, you know somebody who knows people who died for marijuana, okay, over a plant. What we're here to do is stop that. In Oregon, we have legal medical marijuana. We have legal recreational marijuana. That's not true everywhere. I always tell people, I grew up in the South. I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in a place where you grow tobacco. Corn liquor is still legal, and you can buy things that'll kill you at just about every drugstore and just about every corner store. But you can't buy marijuana there, which won't. Marijuana isn't going to kill anybody. The only way that you die from marijuana is if the government puts you in a cage and you die there, or if 100 pounds of it falls off a truck and smashes you. Other than that, it's not going to kill you. That being said, I want everyone here to understand there are still ways that you can be hurt by prohibition. You're not exempt from being ticketed. You're not exempt from being put in a cage. You're not exempt from any of those things. Police officers can still arrest you for certain quantities of marijuana. They can still arrest you for leaving the state with marijuana. They can still arrest you for being at the post office with marijuana. Somebody came to me and they said, hey, I need to go drop this package off. And I said, well, do you have marijuana in your car? And I said, you're about to go on federal property. I don't think that's a very good idea. You get caught in the half plus of Oregon that's federal land. You get caught on tribal land. You get caught on any place where marijuana hasn't been made legal, and they can still put you in a cage. They can still fine you. They can still take away your kids. They can still make your life a living hell. Okay? And so I'm here to say we're going to stop that. That will not happen anymore. Marijuana will be legal in our lifetimes in the entire country. That is what is going to happen. And it's going to happen because I'm going to do it and you're going to do it. And anybody who comes to you and says marijuana shouldn't be legal, you need to look at them, you need to stand up, you need to come out of the closet, and you need to say marijuana should be legal. Marijuana is something I either do or have done, or I know someone who's close to me who's done it. And if you can do that, it ends. Prohibition ends. And none of us have to be in cages anymore. None of us have to pretend we don't do it anymore. And you know what? Marijuana doesn't lead to harder things. At least for me, marijuana led to the hardest thing I did was grad school. That's why I have a doctorate, because of marijuana. Marijuana helped me go from a person who couldn't go to class because I was so sick I couldn't stand up, vomiting in a toilet, to a person who runs a business, pays my taxes, does what I'm supposed to do as an American citizen, and takes care of my family, takes care of my friends. And we can do that together. And if you want to do that, support marijuana legalization, not only here in Oregon, support marijuana legalization everywhere in this country, and support marijuana legalization everywhere on this planet. Thank you.
And that is John Lucy, a local attorney here in Portland. We're speaking at the 2016 Global Marijuana March in Pioneer Courthouse Square in May 2016. That is the end of our hemp show, the Cannabis Common Sense show tonight. We're going to go out on a song by the Herbivores, War is Over. It's over for some of us. It's not over for all of us yet. You know, overregulation of our marijuana is slavery. We need to stop the overregulation of cannabis and restore hemp in all its many forms. We're beginning to scratch the proverbial surface of what hemp's potential is, but we need to replace petroleum, replace most of our fabric, and grow hemp. Hemp for victory. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week and help us restore hemp. This is the Herbivores. We'll be back next week.